There is absolutely no chance of a tournament between mortals in Universe 6 and 7, because in Nappa's base form alone, he's comparable to Hit, which might sound insane, but based on super scaling, we know that Goku went from being nothing compared to Jiren and Super Saiyan Blue at the beginning of the tournament, to then being able to knock out the Universe 11 warrior while only using his base alongside Frieza. Any stamina argument you might make for Jiren can also work against him because Goku and Frieza were equally drained at this point. So Goku got millions of times stronger throughout just 48 minutes of the tournament, which is crazy to think about, but if we're comparing Nappa here to where Goku was in the Moro Saga, then in his base form he should be comparable to the likes of Hit, who is by far the strongest member of the Universe 6 team, at least in the Battle of Destroyers, because obviously Kefla does surpass him in the Tournament of Power. But it really doesn't matter either way, because with his angel-grade usage of Ultra Instinct, Nappa is far stronger than even Champa, let alone any mortal in his universe. So rather than choosing to pick a fight he'd know he'd lose, Champa instead decides to just have a normal, civil conversation with his brother, sharing all sorts of food and delicacies before taking his leave, completely bamboozled at the fact that Nappa, a warrior trained by his brother, is now even stronger than the gods. Well, not really, because although Nappa is stronger than Champa, he does still have a long way to go before rivaling Beerus, as the kitty cat himself has actually kept up his training, not to mention that before that he was already much stronger than Champa. Years would pass, and eventually Beerus would decide to teach Nappa his own powers, that of a god of destruction themselves, as after all, Nappa isn't only proficient in Ultra Instinct. Yes, his mindset better suits the angelic technique, although he does have a knack for destruction, which could definitely come in handy in any sort of battle, so Nappa undergoes his training to achieve a Hakaishin-like form. And after sparring with Beerus many a time, eventually he would reach this. Although it's not Ultra Ego, that was the Prince's technique and takes way too much focus. Instead, Nappa develops his own way of using Hakai. And funnily enough, it actually ends up working in tandem with Ultra Instinct, because rather than just focusing on strategy and techniques while in battle, now he focuses on hatred, bloodlust, and his fighter spirit, which also leaves him open enough to be able to let his body take the reins while in a fight. His mind is focused on his next destructive act, and only that, while his body keeps up with all of the actual fighting. Now, unlike Ultra Ego, he doesn't get stronger the more he gets hit. Rather, he gets stronger the longer the fight goes on. And with his incredible stamina, not only from years of training, but also from his big, bulky physique, he has achieved practically his perfect transformation. He can now dodge effortlessly because his body allows it, and he doesn't have to worry about all of the extra weight that he carries from his large body, because it means he has more stamina and more durability for whenever he does get hit. It also means that he's able to use Ultra Instinct in the Hakaishin form longer. So whenever a threat arises, he takes it out lickety-split. Moro escapes from prison and goes on a hunt for the dragonballz on Namek. Nappa senses his power and teleports straight there. The wizard reclaims his youth and now has all of his magical abilities regained, while Nappa is still far too strong for him and wipes him out with a single giant storm. He levels a good chunk of the planet and does technically erase that part, but he also got rid of the wizard, and if it wasn't for the Saiyan warrior, then the entire planet most likely would have been destroyed by the evil warlock. Not to mention all the other worlds, countless civilizations slaughtered in an instant. Nappa is truly a hero for what he's done here, and he begins to like the gratitude he feels, the thanks he gets whenever he protects a planet from certain annihilation. Namek would not be the last home he decides to save, as the Yardrats eventually would be in danger yet again. All planets across the cosmos face some sort of threat one way or another, and Nappa's there to defend it, liking the way it feels whenever he saves innocent people. After only a decade of his work, Nappa would have raised the mortal level of Universe 7 from about 3.2 all the way up to 8.3, one of the highest across the 12 universes. After a while, Grand Zeno himself wonders why this guy isn't the god of destruction. After all, Beerus hasn't contributed to this growth in any way, shape, or form, so he assembles all of the gods and their angels in a meeting. It bores the hell out of him, but he does recognize its effectiveness, as when talking to them face to face, they are terrified of his power and do pretty much anything he says. He would discuss the matter of all of the gods of destruction's inability to raise their own mortal levels. Beerus would bring up that his has raised considerably in the last couple of years, although the Grand Minister would strike back, saying that that was absolutely not Beerus' accomplishment to take credit for. They all know it was one of his students that was doing an excellent job at being a destroyer without actually holding the title. So that brings them to their next point. Beerus is being replaced. His position will be filled by Nappa, who, although not an official God of Destruction candidate, might as well be. He fits all the requirements and is set to become the God of Destruction in only a couple of years. He does still need to be put through the proper training, even if he will effectively be doing his God of Destruction duties before he actually gets the title. The Saiyan wouldn't actually be at the meeting, however, Beerus would bring up a pretty good point. Nappa wasn't doing it to better the universe, he was just doing it because he enjoyed the way it felt to get everybody cheering for him, which, although is a compelling argument, doesn't change the fact that the mortal score for Universe 7 has more than doubled since he began doing this. So unless he can find a better candidate for his replacement, then Nappa's going to be taking over the position. As for the other gods, they will immediately be doing the same, finding a candidate to replace them, as they have been terribly ineffective over the last couple of centuries. Belmont himself will be immediately replaced because he already has a candidate in training and has for some time. Toppo can fill the role right away and thus will. As for Beerus, he does still get a couple more years to be the God of Destruction and experience all of their luxuries. However, when Nappa's training is up, he will be immediately thrown out. But admittedly, Beerus doesn't really care, because although he will be replaced as God of Destruction, he wasn't really doing his job anyway. So after he's replaced and doesn't have the title anymore, he can just keep going about life as usual. Nappa will probably still stay on his planet anyway, so he'll be able to live with the same luxuries he normally does. Granted, he eventually will die since he loses his immortality, but that won't be for another couple hundred years. As for his training to become God of Destruction, Nappa wouldn't exactly just be doing hand-to-hand combat all the time. He would have a lot of other responsibilities, and most of all would need to raise his overall intelligence, because as it currently stands, he's kind of a brick. It hopefully won't interfere with his usability of Ultra Instinct, although it will make sure he's a lot better in fights. His overall technique and book smarts will increase, although he won't get any physically stronger. He needs to be smarter if he wants to obtain the position of God of Destruction, since there's a lot more than just destroying things involved, even if Beerus wouldn't make you think so. And even though Nappa would hate sitting through boring lectures all day, just like back in Space High School, since this was a demand from the Grand Priest and Zeno themselves, he doesn't have much of a choice. And Whis is a pretty good teacher, so he makes it all entertaining with bright and pretty colors, that way Nappa can stay focused. And only after 3 or 4 years, the Saiyan would have graduated from Whis' teachings. The Angel's glad it only took that long, since for Beerus it took about 20 years. Granted, the kitty cat was sleeping through most of that time, but it still stands that if Nappa didn't get done soon, his mortal lifespan might run out. Whis could have just went to the afterlife and taught him anyway, but it would be a lot easier to teach Nappa while he's still in his golden years, rather than being a grouchy old man. Which honestly is probably the funniest thing ever. A grouchy old Nappa. Although, if we're being honest, it'd pretty much just be the same Nappa, but with a big old beard. It really doesn't matter how old he is now, though, as with the God of Destruction ritual going underway, he would have his youth permanently restored. The first thing he does is return to Earth, visiting his old pal Gohan. to which he finds that his student is much stronger than the last time they met. He had kept up his training and had recently fought off a very powerful opponent, this being Cell. As with Nappa, Whis, and Beerus all returning to Earth multiple times, the version of Cell from this timeline had a little while left to develop. In fact, much more than in the original. So when he finally did, he came out much stronger than they could have ever expected. Although, thankfully, he was only imperfect, so Gohan was able to beat him after achieving an entirely new transformation, that of his beast form. So the new God of Destruction pats his former student on the back, recognizing him now as a proud and powerful warrior, as well as somebody that Nappa is thankful to call his friend. Sadly though, this is probably the last time the two Saiyans will be seeing each other, as Nappa has many things to do as the new God of Destruction, and although a little sorrowful that he'll never get to see Nappa again, he's also proud in his mentor for finally finding his purpose in life, becoming a god, which is incredible to think about. But he didn't just come here to discuss with his old friend. No, Nappa actually had a request. He says that when Gohan dies, he wants him to head to where the Supreme Kai was. Nappa will teach him how to use Ultra Instinct, that way when he goes to heaven, he can just teleport to Shen. Not only hearing how much stronger Gohan has got, but also knowing that it's probably the only person Nappa can trust with this, he asks that the Half Saiyan become his Supreme Kai after his death. If mortals can become gods of destruction, there is no reason to assume the same isn't true for Supreme Kai. And Gohan is the only person that Nappa would want to have his life tethered to. And shocked as well as honored by this, Gohan agrees, as long as he's still able to be in contact with his family in the afterlife, while still doing this whole Kai thing. Granted, Nappa isn't sure if this is allowed, but at the same time, he is the God of Destruction now. He's above all of the Kais, and his authority means if he says something happens, it happens. Although before he sets off on his longest and grandest adventure to better the multiverse, he wants to have one last sparring session with his best and only pupil. Which he does point out also means his worst pupil, but at the same time he just wants to fight Gohan. He's been forced to listen to Whis talk as well as read countless books for literal years at this point, so all he wants is a final, climactic brawl with Gohan, which he would receive, the Half Saiyan transforming into his beast state, which would be leagues stronger than it is in canon. He's kept up his training and he is much stronger than Nappa could have ever predicted, although with a mix of Ultra Instinct and Ultra Ego, he's still able to keep up. And after displaying his newest power, combining Super Saiyan with both of those techniques, he's able to largely outclass Gohan. Although the proud warrior, born of a once scared child, proclaims that in the years to come he will train harder than ever, and once they meet again, he'll be able to push Nappa no matter what power he obtains. And that's exactly what the Destroyer wanted to hear. He flashes a peace sign one last time before heading off to better the universe, just like he has Gohan. With the aid of Whis, the other angels, and all of the new gods by his side, Nappa would usher in a new era of peace and prosperity amongst the entire multiverse. It was the hardest battle that Nappa has ever fought, but he has now proven that he's so much more than just the useless pile of meat and bones that his former superior once saw him as. He is now the God of Destruction of Universe 7, and the best thing that has ever happened to the cosmos. He is now the defender of hope and all that is right in the universe. He is God Nappa. And that is where we're going to be ending things for today. Whether you were watching this series through separate parts or through the full story, I hope you enjoyed. This was actually a lot of fun to make. Nappa surviving is something I believe everybody has thought about at least once, and now being able to turn that idea into a full-fledged story is incredibly interesting. I know it might seem a bit outlandish how I went with some details like making Nappa the God of Destruction, but honestly, with who he is, I can never really see him fading into the background, becoming an obscure side character like the likes of Yamcha and Tien. It just doesn't seem in his nature. He's always going to be in the spotlight, and what better way to do that than becoming a God of Destruction? Sure, he's a meathead and probably wouldn't change too much in the main story, but if we say he's in the future timeline and is at the right place at the right time, then he could definitely end up changing the story in ways that would make for a pretty interesting narrative. He's a lovable, gullible idiot, but most of all, he's Nappa, and I for one am glad that he got to survive in this story. With all that said, this is, always has been, and always will be the Irishman. Talk to you later. Bye.